Modern humans lose their minds if the air conditioning breaks for one afternoon. There's usually shouting, a strongly worded group chat message, and someone standing in front of the freezer with the door open like that's a real solution. Ancient humans didn't have that option. No air conditioning, no fans, no ice, and in some regions, temperatures that could climb well past what your average modern human considers personally offensive. And they still had to sleep, somehow. So how exactly did anyone rest, recover, and not simply overheat into extinction during the hottest stretches of prehistoric life? The short answer is cleverly and with an unreasonable amount of respect for shade. Let's start with the obvious problem, because heat isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Sustained high temperatures interfere with sleep, increase dehydration risk, and in extreme cases, can be genuinely life-threatening, especially overnight when the body is supposed to be cooling down and resting, not fighting off a small internal heat wave. Modern humans solve this with a machine that hums quietly in a wall. Ancient humans solved it with something considerably more elegant, understanding their environment better than most of us understand our own kitchen appliances. Before we go further, subscribe to Past Point, because the next part involves timing, and it turns out timing was doing an enormous amount of work here. Activity scheduling mattered enormously. In many hot regions, the most physically demanding tasks, hunting, gathering, traveling, were pushed toward the cooler edges of the day. Early morning, late afternoon, evening. The brutal midday heat became a built-in rest period, not out of laziness, but because moving heavily during peak heat was genuinely risky. Think of it as an ancient, unofficial version of the midday nap culture still practiced in many hot climates today, except with slightly higher predator-related stakes. Shelter design adapted accordingly too. In many warm environments, structures used thick natural materials, packed earth, stone, or dense vegetation that absorbed heat slowly during the day and released it slowly at night, creating interior temperatures noticeably cooler than the blazing world outside. Airflow mattered just as much as materials. Shelters were often positioned or designed to catch prevailing breezes, sometimes with elevated sleeping platforms that let air circulate underneath, lifting sleepers away from ground-level heat that had spent all day quietly baking. Though again, nobody was writing labels at the time, that ancient humans just toughed out the heat because they were somehow biologically tougher than modern people. They weren't. Human heat tolerance hasn't dramatically changed. What changed was behavior, environment, and an accumulated generational understanding of exactly how to work with a hot climate instead of fighting it directly. If you're enjoying this uncomfortably relatable heat survival strategy, subscribe to Past Point, because the next part gets into something people don't expect: water, and how little of it was actually wasted. Hydration strategy was critical and not casual. In regions with scarce water, locations near reliable water sources weren't convenient, they were mandatory. Entire settlement patterns often revolved around consistent access to water, because dehydration during extreme heat isn't a minor inconvenience, it's a countdown timer. Some groups also relied on foods with naturally high water content. Certain fruits, tubers, and plants effectively hydrating through diet in environments where standing water wasn't always guaranteed. Sleeping positions and coverings adapted too. Lighter, looser coverings, when used at all, allowed better airflow across the skin compared to heavier materials that trapped heat uncomfortably close to the body. Sometimes the smartest solution was simply using minimal covering, letting the body's own cooling systems function the way they'd evolved to. And that evolutionary detail matters more than people realize. Humans are frankly unusually good at heat management compared to most large mammals, thanks largely to a high concentration of sweat glands and comparatively less body hair, adaptations that likely trace back to our species' hot equatorial origins long before any of this migration and shelter building even began. Think of it this way. Your ability to sweat effectively is, evolutionarily speaking, one of humanity's more underrated superpowers, quietly doing more work than most people ever bother to appreciate. Group behavior adjusted too. During the hottest hours, activity often slowed dramatically, conversation moved to shaded areas, and physical exertion was minimized, not out of laziness, but because working directly against your environment during peak heat wasted energy the body couldn't easily spare. Put all of this together, and heat survival stops looking like passive suffering and starts looking like a coordinated, environment-specific strategy built from careful timing, smart shelter design, disciplined hydration, and biological tools humans had been quietly carrying around the entire time. Which brings us back to that overheated modern comparison. No air conditioning, no fans, no ice. What ancient humans actually had was timing, shade, airflow, hydration discipline, and a body genuinely built for cooling itself down if you were smart enough to let it do its job. We didn't outsmart extreme heat through brute toughness. We outsmarted it by paying very close attention and adjusting almost everything around it. If this changed the way you think about your own thermostat, subscribe to Past Point. Somewhere in your evolutionary history is someone who survived brutal heat with nothing but shade, timing, and an impressively functional set of sweat glands.